I struggle to understand why I can land in Paris, get on a train, and end up in Brussels. But if I want to move from Joburg to Gaborone, I must produce a passport. Who's the genius that came up with the scheme? You know, the Europeans are so quick to tell us that we can't bundle ourselves into a single block, but they've done it.
Vusi Thembekwayo, a South African entrepreneur and public speaker, has often advocated for Africa's economic unity and integration, including the idea of free borders. Here are some of his views on why Africa should move towards borderless continent. Watch and pay attention, and I will share my thought later.
I often hear young people today. Last night I was invited by a friend of mine who is from Ghana, and he's in South Africa as well, so we went out for some dinner, spent some time with some young people. And I often hear young people today say things like this. You know, it's time for young people to rise. It's time for the old people to move out of the way. It's time, it's time, it's time. Let me tell you, young people, there is no old person going anywhere. If you want that seat in that office, in that boardroom, in that chamber, in that ministry, you're going to have to fight for it, because power isn't given, it's taken. And so the question as our continent rises is, will we be men and women of courage? Will we be the generation in 50 years' time that our children reference and say, they did it right? They had the template for how to truly pull out of each other the ability to work with each other. And something fascinating is happening today. I must tell you this. This is the good news. The good news is that we're no longer separated. The good news is that we find each other. The good news is that in this room, there are people who are following Vusi Thembekwayo on Instagram. I know I'm very good looking on Instagram, I must tell you, I am very good looking on Instagram. But the good news is that even I have the privilege of following a Professor Lumumba's work. No matter where in the world I find myself, where there are Africans who are speaking, leading, evangelizing, and growing others, we now have the ability to find each other. The true question is, will we have the ability to build with each other? You see, to date, our building strategies all center on these borders that were drawn for us and not by us. And so it becomes the question of, is your nation thriving versus mine? I had this conversation with a friend of mine who also works in capital markets like me in South Africa. I said, I'm really confused by this feud we have with Nigeria. I genuinely don't understand it. Why do we constantly migrate to the global north, and South Africa tries to posture against Nigeria and Nigeria against South Africans? What's the game here? What's the gambit? Whom is it that we're trying to please, and against whom are we trying to please them? Because each time we find our leaders playing that game, the question perhaps we should ask is, who is the master you're trying to please? In this moment and in this season, I think as a generation, we are called to truly understand what it's going to take, one and all, to work with each other, but to build with each other. One of the things in my mind that's missing in this season is a patriotic, flag-bearing, strong group, not only of men and women, but of Nigerians, who understand in the African context what Nigeria is. With the greatest of respect, I think in large part, the average is so distracted by internally what's going on. You're missing who you are in the global context of your continent. You're too worried about what's being said, or who's japaying, or who won the elections, or what's next, without thinking consciously about what you could do as an economy if Nigeria decided we're going to set the path for the rest of the region. As a consequence of this, absent of leadership, what happens? Everything that we have been seeing. And so the question for this moment, for each and every single one of us, is, will we be the courageous men and women who recognize the season we are in? I'm not sure how many of us have traveled to my country of South Africa. Any of you here? Hands up. When you do, And I hope for all of you that you do, which, by the way, side note, a conversation we must have, and Brother Pojo, I don't know how we do this. We need to convene the leaders of this continent to talk about this visa story. This is a disaster. And let me just say the following. I struggle to understand why I can land in Paris, get on a train, and end up in Brussels. But if I want to move from Joburg to Gaborone, I must produce a passport. Who's the genius that came up with the scheme? You know, the Europeans are so quick to tell us that we can't bundle ourselves into a single block, but they've done it. When you publish this, you must just leave that part out, because I'm busy raising money from them, you know, I don't know. They're going to say, he's too radical. And so, even in my own native land of South Africa, the work as South Africans we must do is to conscientize each other about the continent. In my mind, and I was listening to your comments, ma'am, about the youth service, I'm seized to understand and failing to understand why we are not deliberately sending young people into other parts of the continent. Experience the culture, live with the people. To come here, to be here in this beautiful country, I had to go through Ethiopia. From Ethiopia, I was in Zambia. So I went South Africa, Zambia, Ethiopia, Nigeria. Between now and December, I'm going to be in about 8 different African countries. In that same time, it's going to be easier for me to do 5 different countries in Europe than it will be to do 2 different countries in Africa. Less layovers, less time. I'm sorry, can we just pause? Just one moment, pause the time. Who designed this nonsense? Who wrote the script? I have a theory. And here is my theory. You only lock the vault where there is money. And so maybe there's a reason you've been kept out of that neighboring country. Maybe there's a reason you've been kept out of that neighboring region. Maybe there's a reason you can't travel to that other place, because if you were to, there is something you might do that would help us build what we all know we are capable of. So first, keep them away from each other. Second, convince them that they're enemies with each other. And third, convince them that the other one is better than the other one. And before you're done, they will hate each other so much you don't even need to pass policy or law. And in the middle of all of this, here we sit as young people, fruitfully connected by the HTTPS. And we're more worried about what's trending and commenting on it, rather than how do we meaningfully build with each other and do business. I came to tell you here today that I'm only interested in meaningfully building and doing business. I'm only interested in understanding how do we take the platform and put it in Johannesburg or put it in Cape Town. And how do we have not just this conversation here, but that conversation there? Because until and when Africa truly is of a single mind, it will continue to be the fodder and the meal for the rest of the global average. I don't know about you, but I would like a world slightly different for my children than the one I grew up in. So we must recognize then that our value to the world is cemented. And recognize beyond that, that even that very idea of what it is that is our value is changing. A week ago, I was in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. Today, I'm here. I make it my intention to travel the continent. Because, and on this point I will end with this. You see, it's easy for a politician to lie to you about Pan-Africanism when you've never traveled Africa. They can tell you their version of it because they've never been there. They will tell you how Africans speak even though they've never been there. Which, side note, why do Nigerians add O to everything? I'm sat at dinner last night, and this young man I'm with said something so profound. I was like, wow, that's so good. He said, please don't take my words, oh.
One, economic integration and growth. Thembekwayo believes that Africa's economic potential is held back by fragmented markets. Free borders would create a larger, unified African market, making it easier for goods, services, and capital to flow across the continent. This would reduce dependency on foreign markets and attract investment from global business interests in a consolidated African market of over 1 billion people. 2. Intra-African trade. He points out that intra-African trade is currently limited, partially due to restrictive borders and tariffs. With open borders, African nations could trade more efficiently, benefiting from each other's strength in various industries. Increased trade will stimulate local economies, create jobs, and help stabilize economic reliance on imports from outside Africa. 3. United African identity and Pan-Africanism. Thembekwayo often promotes a Pan-African vision, arguing that Africa's colonial borders are arbitrary divisions that do not reflect the cultural and ethnic reality of the continent. He believes that a borderless Africa would foster a sense of unity, allowing Africans to move and settle freely, thus strengthening a shared African identity and solidarity. 4. Labor mobility and skills sharing. With free borders, African countries could address their labor needs more effectively. Skilled workers could move to areas where their expertise is in demand, while those in search of employment could access job markets across the continent. This would help tackle unemployment by matching skills with opportunities across borders. And lastly, innovation and knowledge exchange. Free borders would encourage the exchange of ideas and innovations. By allowing entrepreneurs, students, and professionals to move freely, Africa could foster a more collaborative environment where knowledge, technology, and innovation spread rapidly across regions, driving progress and modernization. Removing barriers would not only streamline trade, but also lay the groundwork for economic integration that align with the AfCFTA's vision of prosperous and interconnected Africa. In summary, Thembekwayo envisions free borders as a key of unlocking Africa's economic, social, and cultural potential. He believes that by breaking down these barriers, African countries can work together to drive growth, share resources, and foster unity, ultimately paving the way for a more resilient and self-sustaining continent. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comment box below. Until next time, cheers and have a good one.